November 17th is the anniversary of the Treaty of Westminster, which is a bit like the Treaty of Paris. I think, which one? Good heavens, surely there have been many. The one I'm talking about was signed in 1511 between King Henry VIII of England and Catholic Spain. And that seems a bit weird given the long history of conflict between England and Spain, including things like La Grande and Felicissima Armada, one of those characteristically pompous absolutist names for something that actually caught fire and sank. Now, the Treaty of Westminster was aimed against France, which is par for the course for English foreign policy. But the fact that Henry, who was then himself a Catholic monarch, defender of the faith, in the words the Pope would later very much regret having uttered, it does raise the question, if Henry had not done his theological thinking with a particularly inappropriate organ, might the subsequent course of English and British geopolitics and foreign policy been dramatically different? If you look at England, it is, of course, the home of freedom, the seat of the whole Anglosphere. And people of the Anglosphere, including for a long time Canadians, and we need to get back to that, have identified themselves as free, and they have opposed tyranny. And the British have also consistently, over many centuries, opposed the domination of Europe by a single power capable of jeopardizing Britain. Now, there have been lively debates within England about how this should be done, and loosely they divide into the Blue Water Tories, who thought it was the job of the Royal Navy to keep whatever did arise in Europe from getting outside its boundaries, and the Whigs, who thought it was necessary to intervene in European politics to prevent any one power from becoming so dominant that it fell to the Royal Navy to do this job. And these theoretical arguments are all fine and good. Very often the press of events forced the English to intervene in continental affairs, and often the alliance system got so messy it sounded like a Monty Python sketch. And yes, sometimes they allied with Catholic powers, sometimes with Protestant, sometimes people switched sides in this bewildering dance. But as Daniel Hannan reminds us in Inventing Freedom, the self-understanding of the Anglosphere for many centuries was not just as a free people, but as a Protestant people, and a people who were free because they were Protestant. And therefore, it is not seen as accidental that England would so often be opposed to Catholic France, which was absolutist, and Catholic Spain, which was absolutist. There was this feeling that Catholicism was naturally allied to absolutism. So what might a Catholic England have done? Might it have been much more comfortable in alliance with the Bourbons or the Habsburgs or whoever was on the Spanish throne? But before we jump to the conclusion that one of the many consequences of Henry's decision to dump his first wife because he blamed her for the fact that they couldn't have a male heir, which was actually, we now understand, his problem, there are a couple of points to bear in mind here. And one of them is that geopolitics does have its own dictates. Ideas are very important, but the physical position of a nation, the nature of its natural resources, the kind of military that it possesses, and the political culture that gives rise to a strong or weak links between the citizens and the state have a very great influence on foreign policy. And as an island nation, a collection of islands, Britain, under any government, would have been concerned about having a dominant European power arise, whatever it was. And so, although you see this long history of resistance to Catholic autocracies, you also get the British opposing Napoleon's, whatever the heck that was, and Kaiser Wilhelm II's Prussian Protestant militarism, and then Hitler's neo-paganism. And the other point to bear in mind is that it's easy to forget, given that history of opposition to Catholicism, that England was for a long time a Catholic country, almost from the first evangelization of the Saxons down to the break with Rome. Magna Carta is signed or sealed in a purely Catholic country. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langton, who's the prime mover behind it, is a Catholic prelate, not an Anglican one. Robin Hood is Catholic. But also, the Reformation under Henry VIII was not Protestant in the sense that Calvinism or Lutheranism was. Somebody said that the Church of England is the best one for a man to belong to because it interferes neither with his politics nor his religion. And the person who said that was actually an Anglican cleric. But English Protestantism is always very different. And like Catholicism in England, the Pope got firmly shoved out whenever he tried to stick his nose into English affairs when England was Catholic. It's a very different political culture, much more attuned to liberty. So I would put it to you, that whatever you think of Henry's break with Rome, and personally it was a grubby affair. It's hard to love the Anglican Church if you know a great deal about its origins, although it has, of course, a long subsequent history that is better than its beginnings. But I don't think English foreign policy would have been very different, because the geopolitical demands of the Anglosphere, beginning with England, and this attachment to liberty that predates the break with Rome and flourishes from Magna Carta on into the modern world, was independent of these formal theological attachments. So I think that Britannia would have ruled the waves and would have ruled them in the interest of liberty, regardless of the inability of Henry and Catherine of Aragon to have a male heir. If you're enjoying these commentaries, please visit my website, that's www.johnrobson.ca, and make a monthly pledge to support my work. And of course, keep watching The Rebel and keep subscribing.